The water was running. That was the first thing Kang Jiwon noticed when he stepped into his penthouse at 3 in the morning, blood still fresh on his knuckles, the weight of tonight's interrogation still heavy in his chest. The water was running in his master bathroom, and he lived alone. His hand moved to the gun at his waist with practiced ease, finger resting against the trigger guard as he moved through the darkness of his bedroom. 20 years in this life had taught him that unexpected sounds in empty homes meant one of two things. Either someone had come to kill him, or someone had come to send a message. Either way, they'd chosen the wrong night. He was already angry, already tired, and whatever fool had broken into Kang Jiwon's sanctuary was about to learn why people whispered his name in Seoul's underworld with the same reverence they reserved for ghosts. He kicked open the bathroom door, gun raised, ready for violence. What he found instead was a woman. Not just any woman. A black woman, standing in a shower, fully clothed, water cascading over her like rain, her eyes closed, her face turned up toward the spray. Her clothes, a torn dress that might have once been beautiful, clung to her body, and even from where he stood, Jwin could see the bruises blooming purple and yellow across her dark skin. Her lip was split. One eye was swollen nearly shut. Her hands trembled as they rose to her face, washing away something he couldn't see, something only she could feel. She hadn't even noticed him yet. She was somewhere else entirely, somewhere far beyond his bathroom, his penthouse, his world. "Get out of my shower," he said in English, his accent thick but clear, gun still pointed at her center mass. She didn't scream. That was the second thing that surprised him. She simply opened her eyes, brown, impossibly deep, and completely unafraid, and looked at him. Looked at the gun. Looked back at his face. "No," she said quietly. "No, he'd killed men for less than defiance. He'd built an empire on the understanding that when Kang Jiwon spoke, people listened or they disappeared." "I'm not finished yet," she said, and there was something in her voice that made him pause. Not fear. Not submission. Just exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that came from running so long you'd forgotten what you were running from. "You can shoot me after. I just need to be clean first. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter. Please subscribe, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. And while you're here, tell me, what location are you watching from? I love knowing where these stories travel." Jwin should have pulled the trigger. Should have called his men. Should have done 1,000 things that didn't involve lowering his gun and staring at this stranger who'd broken into his home and somehow made him feel like the intruder. "You have 5 minutes, he heard himself say. "Then you tell me how you got in here and why I shouldn't put a bullet in you for the disrespect." He stepped back into the bedroom, door open, gun still in hand but pointed at the floor now. He could hear her in there. The water still running, her breathing uneven. When she finally emerged 20 minutes later, not 5, she was wrapped in his robe, her hair still dripping, leaving dark spots on his Italian marble floor. "I'm sorry," she said, and this time there were tears mixing with the water on her face. "I didn't know where else to go." He said you were the only one who could help me." Your son." The world tilted. Jwin didn't have a son. He'd made sure of that. In this life, family was weakness, and he'd sworn years ago never to give his enemies that kind of leverage. No wife. No children. No soft places where a knife could slip between his ribs. "I don't have a son," he said, but even as the words left his mouth, he felt something cold settle in his stomach. She reached into the pocket of the robe, his robe, and pulled out a photograph, water-damaged but still visible. A little boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, with Jwin's eyes and his sharp jawline and his serious expression. A little boy who looked like the ghost of Jwin's own childhood. His name is Miho, she said. And he's dying. The woman's name was Zara Baptiste, and her story came out in fragments over the next hour as Jwin poured her tea he didn't remember buying and watched her hands shake around the cup. She sat at his kitchen island, still wrapped in his robe, still dripping, and told him about Seoul 8 years ago. She'd been a graduate student then, studying Korean literature at Yonsei University on a scholarship that barely covered her rent. She'd taken a job teaching English at a private academy to make ends meet, and that's where she'd met him. Except she hadn't met Jwin, not really. She'd met Jihoon, the version of himself he'd created for moments when he needed to disappear, when the weight of being Kang Jiwon, head of the Kang family syndicate, became too heavy to carry. "You told me you were a businessman," she said, and there was no accusation in her voice, only a kind of sad understanding. "Import-export, you said. You took me to nice restaurants. You listened when I talked about Joseon-era poetry. You never checked your phone when we were together. You made me feel seen," Jwin finished, because he remembered now. God help him, he remembered. 3 months of pretending to be someone else, someone clean, someone who could have a normal life with a normal woman. 3 months of the best sleep he'd had in years. And then one of his enemies had tried to kidnap her, and he'd realized what a mistake he'd made, how selfish he'd been, dragging someone innocent into his world. So he disappeared. Left her a note and enough money to finish her degree and get back to wherever she'd come from, and he'd told himself it was mercy. "I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after you vanished," Zara continued. "I tried to find you, but Jihoon didn't exist. No phone number, no apartment. The lease had been under a fake name. You'd erased yourself completely." She took a sip of tea, and Jwin watched her throat work as she swallowed. "I went home to New York. Had the baby. Raised him alone. I never told him about you because what was I supposed to say? Your father is a ghost who loved me for 3 months and then disappeared. Why come back now?" Jwin's voice was rougher than he intended. "Why after all these years?" "Because Miho has leukemia," she said, and the words hit him like bullets. "Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. He needs a bone marrow transplant, and I'm not a match. None of my family is a match. We've been on the donor registry for 6 months and nothing. His doctors said, they said he is maybe 3 months without a transplant. Maybe less." She pulled out her phone, cracked screen, nearly dead battery, and showed him pictures. The boy from the photograph, but thinner now, frilier, his head smooth from chemotherapy. Still with Jwin's eyes, still with that serious expression that said he was thinking thoughts too heavy for a child. "He's smart," Zara said, smiling through tears. "So smart it scares me sometimes. He taught himself Korean from YouTube videos because he wanted to understand where half of him came from. He asks about you sometimes, and I always change the subject, but last month, when the doctors told us we were running out of options." She wiped her eyes. "He said, 'Mama, maybe it's time to find my father.' Like he knew. Like he'd always known." Jwin stared at the photos. At this child he'd never known existed. This child who had his blood, his face, his legacy of violence coded into every cell. "How did you find me?" he asked. "It took everything I had," Zara admitted. "Money I didn't have for private investigators. Calling in favors from people I'd helped over the years. One of them knew someone who knew someone in Seoul's underground. They said if anyone could track down a ghost, it was the Kang family. So I flew here with the last of my savings. Went to one of your businesses, a club in Gangnam. They threw me out, obviously. But a boy, maybe 12 or 13, saw the whole thing. He followed me outside." "Miho?" Jwin's blood ran cold. "Not Miho. Another boy. A street kid, I think. He said his name was Dae-hoon, and he lived in the sewers beneath the city with other forgotten children. He said he knew you. Said you were the only adult who'd ever treated him like a person. She met Jwin's eyes. He said, Kang Jiwon doesn't help people, but he pays his debts. Tell him you have his son, and he'll listen. Jwin knew Dae-hoon. A pickpocket with more courage than sense, who'd tried to steal Jwin's wallet 2 years ago and ended up with a job running messages instead. Jwin had set up a fund for the sewer children after that: food, blankets, medical care when they needed it. Not charity. He didn't do charity. Just payment for services rendered. Dae-hoon told me where you lived, Zara continued. He gave me a key card to your building service entrance. He said, tell Jwin Hyung that we're even now. And tell him not to be an asshole about this. She almost smiled. He said you'd understand. Jwin understood. Dae-hoon had been dying of pneumonia when they'd met, and Jwin had paid for the hospital stay that saved his life. The boy had been trying to pay that debt ever since. So you broke into my home, Jwin said slowly, found my shower, and decided to wait for me there? I didn't mean to fall apart, Zara whispered. But I've been so scared for so long, and when I saw that shower, all that clean water, all that warmth, I just needed a minute to not be afraid. To wash off the men who grabbed me in the alley outside your building. To wash off the blood from where they hit me for asking questions about you. To pretend, just for a minute, that I wasn't failing my son. The rage that filled Jwin was old and familiar, a cold fire that had sustained him through 2 decades of violence. Men had touched this woman, had hurt her, on his territory, while she was looking for him. Did you see their faces? He asked quietly. Jwin, did you see their faces? She nodded slowly. One of them had a scar across his eyebrow. The other had a tattoo on his neck. A snake, I think. Park's men. It had to be. Park Sung-go, his oldest rival, constantly testing boundaries, constantly pushing to see what he could take. Now he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, there was only the child in those photographs and the question Zara hadn't yet asked, but that hung between them like smoke. I'll get tested, Jwin said. Tomorrow. Tonight, you sleep here, the guest room. Tomorrow, we see if I'm a match. If I am. He paused, trying to find words for something he'd never expected to feel. If I am, then I help him. Help you both. And if you're not? Then I find someone who is. He said it with the absolute certainty of a man who'd spent 20 years making impossible things happen through money, violence, and will. Your son doesn't die, Zara. Not while I'm breathing. She started to cry then, really cry, and Jwin didn't know what to do except stand there awkwardly and refill her tea. He'd comforted women before he killed their husbands or their brothers or their fathers. But this was different. This was the mother of his child, crying in his kitchen because he'd finally said the right thing after 8 years of saying nothing at all. Thank you, she whispered when she could speak again. Thank you. He nodded, unable to trust his own voice, and showed her to the guest room. Gave her clean clothes, his clothes, still too big but better than the torn dress. Made sure she locked the door from the inside. Then he returned to his own bedroom and stared at the photographs she'd left on his kitchen counter. Miho, his son, dying. Jwin had spent 20 years killing people. He'd started his criminal career at 16, working his way up through blood and betrayal until he controlled half of Seoul's underground economy. He'd put bullets in men who begged for mercy. He'd burned buildings with people inside. He'd done things that would send him to hell 1,000 times over, and he'd done them without hesitation because that was what this life required. But he'd never felt like a monster until tonight, staring at the face of a child he'd never known existed, a child who was dying because Jwin hadn't been there, hadn't known, hadn't done the one thing that mattered. He pulled out his phone and called his personal physician. "I need a genetic test," he said when the doctor answered on the second ring, voice heavy with sleep. "Bone marrow compatibility. And I need it done today, not tomorrow. Today. I don't care what it costs. I don't care if you have to wake up." Jwin SSI, it's 3:30 in the morning. "I have a son," Jwin said, and saying it out loud made it real in a way nothing else had. "I have a son, and he's dying, and I need to know if I can save him. So you're going to make this happen in the next 6 hours, or I'm going to find a doctor who will." There was a pause, then, "I'll make the calls." Jwin hung up and walked to his window, looking out over Seoul's glittering skyline. Somewhere out there, in a hospital in New York, a little boy with his eyes was fighting for his life. A little boy who'd taught himself Korean from YouTube videos because he wanted to understand where half of him came from. A little boy who'd looked at his mother with the wisdom of someone far older and said, "Mama, maybe it's time to find my father." "I'm sorry I wasn't there," Jwin whispered to the city, to the universe, to a child who couldn't hear him. "But I'm here now. And I'm going to fix this. Whatever it takes." Behind him, in the guest room, Zara Baptiste slept the sleep of someone who'd been running on empty for too long, finally allowing herself to rest now that someone else was carrying the weight. And in the bathroom, where this all began, the shower still dripped quietly, each drop of water marking time, counting down to a future that none of them could predict. The storm was coming. Jwin could feel it in his bones. But for the first time in 20 years, he wasn't running toward violence for its own sake. He was running toward something else entirely. He was running toward redemption. The tests took 6 hours, just as promised. Jwin sat in his private physician's office at 9 in the morning, Zara beside him, both of them exhausted from a night with no sleep. Dr. Han worked in silence, drawing blood, taking samples, making phone calls to laboratories that owed him favors. By 3 in the afternoon, they had preliminary results. "You're a match," Dr. Han said, and Jwin felt something in his chest release, something he hadn't known was holding him hostage. "Not perfect, you're a half match, which is common for parents and children. But it's enough. With the right preparation, with proper anti-rejection protocols, this could work." Zara made a sound beside him, something between a laugh and a sob, and Jwin found himself reaching for her hand without thinking. She squeezed his fingers so hard it hurt, but he didn't pull away. "How soon can we do this?" Jwin asked. "That's more complicated." Dr. Han removed his glasses, cleaned them, put them back on, all the tells of a man preparing to deliver bad news. "The procedure itself isn't the issue. We can have you prepped and ready within a week. But the boy is in New York, and moving a critically ill child across the Pacific is risky. He'd need medical transport, a team of specialists, coordination between hospitals." "Money isn't a problem," Jwin interrupted. "I know that, Jwin SSI. But this isn't just about money. This is about international medical protocols, visa issues, insurance complications." "Then we bring him here," Jwin said simply. "Private medical flight. Best team available. Whatever he needs." Dr. Han exchanged a glance with Zara, who nodded slowly. "His oncologist in New York is Dr. Sarah Chen. She's been amazing with Miho. I'd want her involved in any decision to move him." "Give me her number," Jwin said. "I'll make it happen." What followed was 48 hours of controlled chaos that reminded Jwin why he'd survived 2 decades in the underworld. He called in favors from politicians he'd funded, from customs officials he'd bribed, from medical professionals he'd helped over the years when their own families needed saving. He hired a medical transport team from Singapore, bought a private jet, and arranged for a suite at Seoul's best international hospital, a hospital where he donated enough money over the years that they didn't ask questions when he demanded the impossible. Dr. Chen, when he finally spoke to her, was skeptical at first. "Mr. Kang, I appreciate that you want to help, but moving Miho right now." "His mother is here," Jwin interrupted. "His father, Mi, is here and ready to donate. You have my medical records. You know I'm a match. Every day we waste is a day he gets weaker." "What does he need to survive the flight?" There was a long pause. Then, red blood cell transfusion before departure. Constant monitoring during the flight. A full medical team on standby. And, she sighed. "And prayer, Mr. Kang. A lot of prayer." "I don't pray," Jwin said. "But I do keep my word. Keep him stable. I'll handle everything else." He hung up and turned to find Zara watching him from the doorway of his office, something unreadable in her expression. "What?" he asked. "You're different," she said quietly. "From the man I knew 8 years ago. Harder. Colder. But also—" She paused, searching for words. "Also more real, somehow. Like you've stopped pretending to be something you're not." "I stopped being Jihoon a long time ago," Jwin admitted. "This is who I am, Zara. This is what I do. I hurt people. I break laws. I build empires on blood and fear. If that's too much for you—" "You're saving our son," she interrupted. "I don't care what you do for a living. I don't care what your empire is built on. You're saving our son, and that's all that matters." But Jwin cared. He cared because Miho would be here soon, and the boy would have questions, and Jwin would have to decide what truths to tell and what lies to maintain. He cared because every moment of his life had led him to this point, and he didn't know if he was capable of being the father a dying child needed. The call came 3 days later. Miho was stable enough to fly. They'd leave New York in 12 hours, arrive in Seoul the next day. Jwin barely slept that night, pacing his penthouse, checking and rechecking everything. The hospital suite. The medical team. The security detail, because even now, even with his son's life on the line, he couldn't forget that he had enemies who would love to exploit this weakness. Park Sung-go especially. The man whose employees had attacked Zara in the alley. Jwin had sent a message. 3 of Park's businesses had burned to the ground over the past 2 days, and everyone understood why. But Park wasn't someone who took losses quietly. He'd retaliate. It was only a question of when. Zara spent those 3 days in a kind of fever dream, alternating between hope and terror, calling Dr. Chen every few hours for updates on Miho's condition. Jwin watched her slowly fall apart and pull herself back together, over and over, and wondered how she'd done this alone for months. How she'd carried this weight without breaking. "Tell me about him," he said on the 3rd night, when they were both too wired to sleep, sitting in his living room with the lights of Seoul spread out before them. "Not the sick parts. The real parts. Who is he when he's not fighting for his life?" Zara smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her since she'd appeared in his shower. "He's stubborn. So stubborn. Like you, I think. He decides something, and nothing can change his mind." She pulled out her phone, showed him videos. Miho at a science fair, explaining chemical reactions with the seriousness of a professor. Miho playing chess, beating an opponent twice his age. Miho reading in Korean, slowly but carefully, his small face scrunched in concentration. "He wants to be a doctor," Zara said softly. "He told me that after his diagnosis. Said he wanted to help other kids who got scared like he did. I told him he needed to get better first, and he looked at me with those eyes, your eyes, and said, 'I will, Mama. I'm too stubborn to die.'" Jwin felt something break open in his chest, something he'd kept locked away for so long he'd forgotten it was there. "He is going to be a doctor," he said firmly. "He's going to get better and grow up and save lives. I'll make sure of it." "You can't control everything, Jwin. Watch me." The plane landed at Incheon International Airport at 6 in the morning. Jwin had arranged for them to bypass normal customs, Another favor called in, another debt incurred, and the medical transport took Miho directly to the hospital. Jwin and Zara followed in his car, his driver navigating Seoul's morning traffic with practiced efficiency. "Are you ready for this?" Zara asked as they pulled up to the hospital. Jwin didn't answer because he didn't know. How did you prepare to meet a son you'd never known existed? A son who was fighting for his life. A son who carried your face and your blood and your stubbornness, but none of your sins? They walked through the hospital together, up to the private floor Jwin had reserved, past security guards who nodded respectfully, past nurses who'd been briefed on the situation. Dr. Han met them outside Miho's room. "He's stable," the doctor said. "Tired from the journey, but stable. Dr. Chen is with him now running tests." She said he wants to meet you, Jwin SSI. "He's been asking for you since he woke up." Jwin's mouth went dry. What did his mother tell him about me? "The truth," Zara said quietly. "That I found you. That you're a match. That you're going to help save his life." She paused. "I didn't tell him what you do for a living. That's between you and him, when the time is right. For now, he just knows you're his father, and you're here." The door opened, and Dr. Chen emerged, an Asian American woman in her 40s with kind eyes and tired smile. "Mr. Kang," she said, offering her hand. "Thank you for making this possible. The flight was rough, but he's stronger than he looks." She glanced at Zara. "He wants to see you both. Together." This was it. The moment everything changed. Jwin walked into the hospital room, Zara beside him, and saw his son for the first time. Miho was small, too small for 7 years old, made smaller by illness and the oversized hospital bed. His head was smooth from chemotherapy, but his eyes, Jwin's eyes, were alert and focused. He was hooked up to monitors and IVs, but he sat up straight when they entered, that same serious expression Jwin had seen in photographs. "Hi, Mama," Miho said, his English clear, but accented with Korean inflections from his YouTube studies. Then he looked at Jwin, and something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe. Or just understanding that this was the moment he'd been waiting for. "Hi," Miho said quietly. "Are you my dad?" Jwin had faced down Yakuza bosses and Chinese triads. He'd negotiated with terrorists and corrupt politicians. He'd stared death in the face more times than he could count and never flinched. But this 7-year-old boy with his eyes, asking the simplest question in the world, this brought him to his knees. He crossed the room and knelt beside the bed so he was eye level with his son. "Yes," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "I'm your dad. I'm Jwin." Miho studied him for a long moment, and Jwin had the uncomfortable feeling of being seen, really seen, in a way he rarely allowed. Then Miho smiled, small but genuine, and said, "You look sad." "Don't be sad. I'm going to be okay." "I know you are," Jwin said, because what else could he say? "I'm going to make sure of it." "Mama said you're a match. That means we have the same blood, right? The same DNA?" "That's right." "Cool," Miho said, and then, with the bluntness of a child who'd spent too much time around doctors, "When can we do the transplant?" Dr. Chen said the sooner the better. "Soon," Dr. Han interjected from the doorway. "But first, we need to make sure you're strong enough for the procedure. We need to run more tests, adjust your medications, get your body ready. Your father also needs to prepare. The donation process isn't easy." "I can handle it," Jwin and Miho said simultaneously, and Zara laughed despite herself, the sound bright and unexpected in the sterile hospital room. "You really are his father," she said, shaking her head. They spent the next hour in that room, Jwin watching as Zara fussed over Miho and Dr. Chen explained the timeline. The transplant would happen in 1 week, assuming Miho remained stable. Jwin would undergo his own preparation, medications to increase stem cell production, tests to ensure he could handle the procedure. It would hurt. It would be exhausting. But it was nothing compared to what Miho had already endured. Before Jwin left, Miho called out to him. "Dad." The word hit him like a bullet, straight through the heart. "Yes. Thank you," Miho said seriously, "for coming to help me. Mama said you didn't know about me before, but you came anyway. That means you're a good person." Jwin almost laughed at that, because he was many things: a killer, a criminal, a monster in expensive suits, but good had never been one of them. Still, looking at his son's face, seeing the trust there, he found himself wanting to be good. Wanting to deserve that word. "I'll always come for you," Jwin said, and he meant it with everything he had. Always. No matter what. He left the hospital that afternoon with Zara, both of them quiet as his driver navigated back toward the city. Jwin was thinking about timelines and preparations, about Park Sung-go and the retaliation that was surely coming, about how to keep Miho safe while his own world tried to tear itself apart. He didn't see the black car following them until it was too late. The first bullet shattered his rear window. The second hit his driver in the shoulder, and the car swerved wildly as the man lost control. Jwin threw himself over Zara, shielding her with his body as glass rained down around them. His driver, trained for exactly this scenario, regained control and accelerated, but there were two more cars boxing them in now, professional and coordinated. This wasn't random. This was Park making his move, and he'd chosen the worst possible moment. "Stay down," Jwin growled at Zara, reaching for the gun he always kept in the car's hidden compartment. His mind was already calculating angles, exits, survival probabilities. His phone was buzzing, probably his security team responding to the tracker in his car, but help wouldn't arrive in time. They were 3 minutes from his penthouse. 3 minutes from safety. If they could just... The car hit something, a spike strip, thrown across the road, and the tires exploded. They spun out, crashed into a barrier, and everything went sideways. Literally sideways, the world tumbling as the car rolled once, twice, before slamming to a stop upside down. Jwin tasted blood. Heard Zara crying beside him. Saw figures approaching through the shattered windshield and recognized Park Sung-go's face among them. "Kang Jiwon," Park said, crouching down to look into the ruined car. "I heard you have a son now. How wonderful. How vulnerable that must make you feel." Jwin aimed his gun at Park's head, but his arm wouldn't cooperate, wouldn't hold steady. He was hurt worse than he'd thought. "Let her go," Jwin said, each word costing him. "This is between us." "Oh, I don't think so," Park said, smiling. "I think she's the key to everything. Your weakness. Your pressure point. And that boy in the hospital? Well..." He straightened up, motioned to his men. "Get them both. Leave Kang alive, I want him to watch." Hands reached into the car, dragging Zara out even as she screamed and fought. Jwin tried to follow, tried to stop them, but his legs wouldn't move. Trapped in the wreckage, bleeding and helpless, he could only watch as they took her. The last thing he heard before losing consciousness was Park's voice, drifting back to him. "Let's see how much you're willing to sacrifice for your new family, Kang. Let's see what kind of father you really are." Then darkness took him, and the world went away. Jwin woke to the sound of machines beeping and the smell of antiseptic. Hospital. Again. But a different room, a different floor. He tried to sit up, and pain lanced through his ribs, broken, probably, from the crash. His left arm was in a cast. His head felt like someone had used it as a drum. "Don't move." Dr. Han's voice came from somewhere to his right. "You have 3 broken ribs, a fractured ulna, a severe concussion, and more bruises than I care to count. You're lucky to be alive." "Zara," Jwin croaked, his throat raw. "Where is she?" The silence that followed told him everything he needed to know. Park's men took her, Dr. Han said quietly. By the time your security team arrived, they were gone. They've been searching for the past 8 hours, but 8 hours. Jwin sat up despite the pain, despite his doctor's protests. I've been unconscious for 8 hours? You nearly died, Jwin SSI. You coded twice in the ambulance. We brought you back, but… Get out, Jwin said coldly. Everyone out. Now. Dr. Han started to protest, then saw something in Jwin's expression that made him reconsider. He ushered the nurses out, leaving Jwin alone in the private room. The moment the door closed, Jwin ripped out his four, ignoring the blood that welled up on his hand. He found his phone on the bedside table, cracked screen but still functional, and called the one person who could help him now. Boss, came the immediate response. Lee Min-jun, his second in command, the man who'd been with him since the beginning. Thank God you're awake. We've been… Where is she? Jwin interrupted. We don't know yet. Parks covered his tracks well. But we have people looking, calling in every favor we're owed. We'll find her, boss. I promise. Not fast enough. Jwin stood, legs shaking, and started pulling on the clothes someone had left folded on a chair. His clothes, stiff with dried blood. Park didn't take her to hide her. He took her to use her. Which means he's going to contact me with demands. He already did, Min-jun said grimly. 2 hours ago. He wants the docks. All of them. And the shipping contracts with the Chinese. He wants you to hand over 1/3 of your operation, or… He paused. Or he kills her. You have 24 hours to decide. 24 hours. In 8 hours, he was supposed to undergo the final preparations for Miho's transplant. In 1 week, he was supposed to save his son's life. And now Park Sung-go had stolen the mother of his child and was demanding he dismantle everything he'd built. The rage that filled Jwin was incandescent, a white-hot fury that burned away the pain, the exhaustion, everything except purpose. Tell Park I'll give him what he wants, Jwin said, buttoning his shirt with one hand, his cast making everything awkward. Tell him I'll meet him at the Hongang Bridge at midnight. Just him and me. No armies. No games. Boss, that's… I know what it is, Jwin interrupted. But he doesn't know what I know. He doesn't know that I've been waiting for him to make this exact mistake for 5 years. Because that was the truth of it. Park Sung-go was predictable for all his cunning. He always took hostages. Always made the same demands. Always thought violence and fear were enough to control people like Jwin. But Jwin had learned something over the past week, something that changed everything. He wasn't afraid of death anymore. He was afraid of failing his son. And that made him more dangerous than Park could possibly imagine. He hung up and called the hospital's security desk. This is Kang Jiwon. I need you to put a detail on room 701, my son's room. No one gets in or out without my explicit authorization. Not doctors, not nurses, not janitors. No one. Do you understand? Yes, Kangnim. We'll have armed guards posted immediately. Good. And if anyone tries to get to that boy, you shoot first and ask questions never. I don't care who they are. He hung up before they could respond and made his way to Miho's floor. The guards Dr. Han had mentioned were already in place, and they nodded respectfully as he approached. Inside the room, Miho was sleeping, his small chest rising and falling steadily, machines monitoring every heartbeat. Jwin stood there for a long moment, just watching his son breathe. Memorizing the curve of his cheek, the flutter of his eyelashes, the peace on his face. Then he pulled out his phone and started a video recording. Miho, he said quietly, knowing the boy couldn't hear him but needing to say it anyway. If you're watching this, it means something went wrong tonight. It means I didn't come back from fixing a problem I should have dealt with years ago. He paused, trying to find words adequate to the moment. Your mother is in trouble because of me, because of who I am and what I do. I'm going to get her back, but if I can't, I need you to know some things. He stopped recording, deleted it, started over. 3 times before he got it right. I'm not a good man, he finally said to the sleeping child, to the camera, to whatever future might or might not exist. I've done terrible things. Unforgivable things. But you make me want to be better. You and your mother. You make me remember that I was human once, before all this. Before the blood and the violence and the empire built on broken bones. His voice cracked, but he pushed through. If I don't survive tonight, I've made arrangements. You'll be taken care of. The transplant will happen. I've already given samples, and Dr. Han knows what to do. You'll get better. You'll grow up. You'll become the doctor you want to be, and you'll save lives instead of taking them. He wiped his eyes, angry at the tears, angry at himself for getting emotional when there was work to do. Be better than me, he finished. Be the man I could have been if I'd made different choices. Love your mother the way I should have 8 years ago. And if you ever think about following in my footsteps, remember this moment and choose a different path. He ended the recording, sent it to a secure server with instructions to deliver it to Miho if Jwin didn't check in within 24 hours. Then he left his son's room and went to prepare for war. Here's where you pause and think with me. If you had to choose between saving the person you love or protecting everything you'd built over a lifetime, which would you choose? And would you be able to live with that choice? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you'd do in Jwin's position. Midnight came faster than Jwin expected. He stood on the Hangang Bridge, wind whipping his coat around his legs, his broken ribs screaming with every breath. He ditched the cast, needed both hands free for what was coming, and loaded himself up with enough painkillers to keep functioning. The guns were hidden but accessible. The backup was in place, scattered through the area in civilian clothes, waiting for his signal. But he hoped he wouldn't need them. Park arrived exactly on time, flanked by 4 men. No Zara. Jwin felt his jaw tighten, but kept his expression neutral. Kang Jiwon, Park said, spreading his arms wide in mock welcome. You look terrible. That crash really did a number on you, didn't it? Where is she? Jwin asked flatly. Safe. For now. Depends entirely on what happens in the next few minutes. Park circled him slowly, like a predator evaluating prey. I'll be honest, Jwin. I didn't expect you to fold this easily. Thought you'd at least put up a fight. Maybe that's what fatherhood does to a man, makes him soft. You think I'm soft? Jwin asked quietly. You think having a son makes me weak? I think it gives me leverage I didn't have before. I think you'll give me everything I want because you're afraid of what I'll do to that woman if you don't. Park smiled. So here's the deal. You sign over the docs, the shipping routes, and the Chinese contracts. You do it tonight, right now, with the papers I brought. And I give you back the mother of your child, only slightly damaged. Jwin reached into his coat, Park's men tensed, hands moving to their weapons, and pulled out a USB drive. Everything you asked for is on here, he said. Digital signatures, transfer documents, access codes. It's all yours. Park's eyes widened. That's unusually cooperative of you. I meant what I said. My son needs his mother. I won't let her die because of my pride. Jwin held out the drive. Take it. Let her go. We both walk away from this. Park took the drive slowly, suspicion clear on his face. What's the catch? No catch. You win, Park. You finally beat me. Congratulations. Jwin kept his voice empty, defeated. Can I see her now? Can I at least know she's alive? Park considered this, then nodded to one of his men. A phone was produced, a video played. Zara, tied to a chair in what looked like a warehouse, bruised but breathing. Her eyes widened when she saw the camera. Jwin, don't, she started, but the video cut off. Satisfied, Park asked. Where is she? Jwin repeated. The old factory in Guro district. You know, the one where we used to store shipments before you took it from me 3 years ago. Poetic, don't you think? Park pocketed the USB drive. I'll let her go once I verify these documents are legitimate. Should take about an hour. You can pick her up then. I'm coming with you, Jwin said. I don't trust you to keep your word unless I'm there. Not a chance. You stay here until I'm satisfied or the deal's off. This was the moment. The moment Park had walked into Jwin's trap without even realizing it. Then I guess we have a problem, Jwin said quietly, and his entire demeanor changed. The defeat vanished, replaced by the cold certainty that had carried him through 2 decades of survival. Because that USB drive is encrypted with a time lock. You have 30 minutes to unlock it using the code I'm about to give you, or it wipes itself. And the only way you get that code is if I see Zara walk out of that factory alive. Park's face darkened. You're bluffing. Am I? Wanna risk it? Because I'm very curious what the Chinese will do to you when they find out you tried to steal their contracts without authorization. They don't like competitors who overreach, Park. They tend to make examples of them. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of the Han River below and the distant traffic of Seoul. Park's men shifted nervously, hands on their weapons, but unsure whether to draw them. You think you're clever, Park said finally. But you're forgetting something. I have the woman. I have the leverage. All I have to do is kill her and your little plan falls apart. Go ahead, Jwin said, and the ice in his voice was absolute. Kill her. Then watch what happens. Because the moment she dies, I have nothing left to lose. No son's mother to protect. No reason to play nice. Just rage and resources and a very long memory of every slight you've ever committed against me. He took a step forward, and Park actually stepped back. You know what I'm capable of when I'm angry, Park. You've seen the bodies. So ask yourself, do you really want to find out what I'm capable of when I'm grieving? The bluff was razor thin, held together by reputation and raw will, but it worked. Park's certainty wavered. 1 hour, Park said finally. You verify the documents, you give me the code, and I let her go. But if you try anything, if I even suspect you're planning something, I'll kill her slowly and send you pieces. Understood, Jwin said. Let's go. They went together, Park's car leading and Jwin following in his own vehicle. His security team shadowed them from a distance, invisible but present, ready to intervene if things went wrong. Jwin made calls as he drove, setting pieces in motion, preparing for every contingency. The factory in Guro district was exactly where Park had said, a decaying relic of Seoul's industrial past, now used by the underworld for exactly this kind of thing. Zara was inside, Jwin could feel it. But so were at least a dozen of Park's men, armed and ready for violence. They left the cars and walked inside together, Park's paranoia keeping Jwin close, preventing him from signaling his team. The interior of the factory was vast and dark, broken machinery casting strange shadows in the dim light. And there, in the center of the space, Zara sat tied to a chair exactly as she'd appeared in the video. Jwin, she called out when she saw him, relief and terror mixing in her voice. Don't trust him. He's going to. One of Park's men hit her, and Jwin saw red. He moved without thinking, without planning, pure instinct driving him forward. His fist connected with the man's jaw, and there was a satisfying crunch as bone broke. Park's other men reached for their guns, but Jwin was already moving, flowing through them like water, like violence, like everything he'd learned in 20 years of surviving. He took the first man's gun and shot the second. Used the third as a shield against the fourth's bullets. Dropped, rolled, came up firing, and suddenly it was just him and Park and 4 bodies on the ground and the rest of Park's men backing away because they recognized what was happening here. Kang Jiwon had stopped pretending to be civilized. You made a mistake, Jwin said, advancing on Park with the gun pointed at his head. You took her. You hurt her. You threatened my son. Each word was punctuated by a step forward, forcing Park to retreat. And you thought I'd forgotten how to do this. How to be the monster everyone's afraid of. Jwin, wait, Park started, but Jwin was done waiting. He shot Park in the knee, and the man went down screaming. Then he walked past him, toward Zara, untying her with hands that shook not from fear, but from barely controlled rage. Are you okay? He asked, and his voice was gentle with her, only with her. I'm fine, she said, though she clearly wasn't. But you said you were going to give him everything. I lied. Jwin helped her stand, keeping himself between her and Park's remaining men. I'm very good at lying when I need to be. Behind them, Park was still screaming, clutching his shattered knee. You're dead, Kang. You're dead. I'll hunt you down. I'll kill your son. Jwin shot him again, in the other knee this time. The screaming intensified. You won't do anything, Jwin said calmly, because you're going to prison. That USB drive? It contains evidence of every crime you've committed for the past 10 years. Murders, trafficking, embezzlement, everything. And it's already been delivered to the police, along with a substantial donation to their retirement fund. They'll be here in about. He checked his watch. 3 minutes. You set me up, Park gasped through the pain. I gave you the chance to be smart, Jwin corrected. You chose violence instead. That's on you. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Jwin's security team materialized from the shadows, securing the perimeter, making sure Park's remaining men understood that resistance was futile. And Jwin led Zara out of that factory, into the cool soul night, both of them alive despite everything. How did you know? Zara asked as they drove back to the hospital, her hand clasped tightly in his. How did you know he'd take you to me? Because I know how men like Park think, Jwin said. They can't resist showing off their power. Can't resist making you watch them win. It's their weakness. He glanced at her, taking in the bruises on her face, the fear still lingering in her eyes. I'm sorry I let him take you. I should have been more careful. You saved me, Zara said simply. That's all that matters. But Jwin knew better. He'd saved her this time, but there would be others. Men like Park didn't vanish just because you put them in prison. They had friends, allies, people who'd want revenge for what Jwin had done. Which meant he had a choice to make, continue this life and put his family in constant danger, or find a way out. Find a way to be the father Miho needed, the man Zara deserved. He didn't know if such a way existed. But for the first time in 20 years, he wanted to try. They arrived at the hospital just as dawn was breaking over Seoul, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Exhausted, battered, but alive. They went straight to Miho's room, where their son was just waking up. Mom? Dad? Miho said sleepily, then focused on their faces, on Zara's bruises and Jwin's barely contained exhaustion. What happened? Everything's fine, Zara said, forcing a smile. Just some grown-up problems. Nothing for you to worry about. But Miho wasn't fooled. He looked at Jwin with those two wise eyes and said, You protected her. You kept her safe. I did, Jwin said, because there was no point lying to this child who saw too much. Good, Miho said seriously. That's what dads do. They protect their families. And Jwin realized, standing there in that hospital room with his son and the woman who'd carried their child alone for 7 years, that Miho was right. That's exactly what dads do. Now he just had to figure out how to do it without the violence, without the empire, without all the things that had defined him for so long. But that was a problem for tomorrow. For today, they were alive. They were together. And the transplant was in 5 days. 5 days to save his son's life. 5 days to figure out how to leave his old life behind. 5 days to become the man Miho already believed he was. It would have to be enough. The days before the transplant passed in a strange kind of suspended reality. Jwin underwent his final preparations, medications that made him feel nauseous and weak, tests that confirmed he was still a match, lectures from Dr. Han about rest and hydration that he mostly ignored. He had too much to do, too much to arrange. Park Sung-go was in police custody, but Jwin's prediction had been correct. Park's allies were already making noise, demanding explanations, threatening retaliation. Jwin dealt with it the way he always had, through carefully applied pressure, strategic bribes, and the occasional demonstration that he was still not someone to be crossed. 2 of Park's lieutenants disappeared in the night. 3 of Park's businesses burned. The message was clear: attack Kang Jiwon's family, and there would be consequences. But even as he did these things, Jwin felt something shifting inside him. He'd look at Miho, growing stronger each day with proper medical care, excited about the upcoming transplant, teaching Zara Korean phrases he'd learned from K-dramas, and wonder what he was building. What kind of legacy he was leaving. "You're thinking too much," Zara said one evening. They were in the hospital cafeteria, both of them exhausted from the day's preparations. "I can see it in your face. You're somewhere else." "I'm thinking about after," Jwin admitted. "After the transplant. After Miho gets better." "What then?" "What do you mean?" "I mean," he struggled for words, "this life I have. The things I do. The people I hurt. It was fine when it was just me. When I had nothing to lose. But now." He gestured vaguely toward the upper floors, toward where Miho slept. "Now I have everything to lose." Zara was quiet for a long moment, stirring her coffee. "Are you saying you want out?" "I don't know if out exists for someone like me. But I want something different. Something that doesn't involve my son growing up afraid that his father might not come home one night. Something that doesn't involve you getting kidnapped by my enemies. So, what do you want?" It was such a simple question, but Jwin realized he didn't have an answer. He'd spent 20 years not wanting, just surviving, just accumulating power because power meant safety. He'd never stopped to consider what he actually wanted beyond the next fight, the next deal, the next territory to claim. "I want to watch Miho grow up," he said finally. "I want to teach him things that aren't about violence. I want to be there for his first day of school, his graduation, his wedding. All the normal things I thought I'd never have." He met Zara's eyes. "And I want you to look at me without fear. Without wondering if I'm about to do something terrible." "I don't fear you," Zara said softly. "I fear for you. There's a difference." "Is there?" She reached across the table, took his hand. "You saved my life. You're saving our son's life. You're trying to be better than what your circumstances made you. That's not something to fear. That's something to admire." But Jwin knew better. He'd seen the hesitation in her eyes when he'd shot Park. The moment of recognition that the man she loved 8 years ago, gentle Ji-hoon who talked about poetry and listened to her dreams, was just one face of someone much more complicated. Much more dangerous. After the transplant, he said, decision crystallizing even as he spoke, "I'm going to start changing things. Restructuring my operations. Finding people to take over the parts of my business that are problematic. Keeping only the legitimate enterprises." "Can you do that?" Zara asked. "Can you just walk away from this life?" "I don't know. But I have to try. For him. For you. For..." He paused. "For me. Because I'm tired, Zara. I've been tired for a long time. I just didn't know it until now." The transplant was scheduled for the next morning. Jwin spent his last night before the procedure lying awake in his hospital room, thinking about everything that had led him here. The choices he'd made. The people he'd hurt. The empire he'd built on broken bones and blood money. At 2 in the morning, his door opened. He reached for the gun on his bedside table, always within reach, even here, but it was just Miho, padding in on bare feet, her pole rattling beside him. "You should be sleeping," Jwin said, but he sat up, making room on the bed. "I can't sleep," Miho admitted, climbing up beside him. "I'm nervous about tomorrow." "Don't be. It's going to be fine." "How do you know?" "Because I won't accept any other outcome," Jwin said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. Miho was quiet for a moment, picking at the hospital blanket. "Then, Dad? Are you scared?" "Terrified," Jwin admitted, because he'd promised himself he'd never lie to this child. "Of the procedure? Of failing you? Of not being enough to save you? Of—" He stopped, unsure how much truth a 7-year-old could handle. "Of being a bad dad?" Miho finished, with that uncanny ability of his to see straight through people. "Yeah," Jwin said quietly. "That? You're not a bad dad," Miho said with absolute certainty. "You came when Mom needed you. You fought bad guys to protect her. You're giving me your bone marrow so I can get better. That's what good dads do. I've done bad things, Miho. Things I can never take back. Things that would make you—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "Things that would make me what?" "Stop loving you." Miho looked up at him with Jwin's own eyes, and there was such understanding there, such acceptance. "Mom told me you're complicated. That you've made mistakes, but you're trying to be better. She said that's what matters, not who you were, but who you're trying to become." Jwin felt something in his chest crack open, something he'd kept frozen for so long he'd forgotten it could thaw. "Your mother is very wise." "I know," Miho said, then yawned hugely. "Can I stay here tonight? In your room?" "Yeah," Jwin said, and helped his son settle against him, careful of the 4 lines, careful of the monitors. "You can stay." They fell asleep like that, father and son, the night before they'd try to save each other's lives. The procedure happened at 8 in the morning. Jwin was taken first, the medical team harvesting stem cells from his bone marrow in a process that hurt worse than being shot, but that he endured without complaint. He thought of Miho. He thought of Zara. He thought of the life he wanted to build instead of the life he'd been living. And then it was Miho's turn, and all Jwin could do was wait. Zara sat beside him in the recovery room, both of them silent, holding hands like lifelines. Dr. Han and Dr. Chin were with Miho, along with a team of specialists who'd been preparing for this moment for days. The transplant itself would take hours, cleaning Miho's system of damaged cells, introducing Jwin's healthy stem cells, monitoring for rejection or complications. "He's going to be fine," Zara said for the 100th time, but Jwin could hear the fear beneath the words. "I know," he lied, because what else could he say? Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky. Jwin dozed, woke, dozed again, each time hoping for news. His phone buzzed constantly, business that couldn't wait, problems that needed solving, but he ignored all of it. Nothing mattered except the boy down the hall, fighting for his life with Jwin's cells flowing through him. Finally, after an eternity, Dr. Chin emerged from the surgical wing. Her face was tired, but smiling. "It's done," she said. "The transplant was successful. Now we wait and see if his body accepts the new cells. The next 72 hours are critical, but—" She smiled wider. "But I'm optimistic. He's strong. He's a fighter. Can we see him?" Zara asked, already standing. "He's still unconscious from the anesthesia, but yes." "Come on." They went together, Jwin limping from his own procedure, Zara steady beside him. Miho looked so small in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines and monitors, but his vital signs were strong. Steady. Promising. "Hey, kid," Jwin whispered, even though Miho couldn't hear. "We did it. First part's done. Now you just have to heal." He stayed there for hours, watching his son breathe, watching the monitors track heartbeats and oxygen levels. Zara eventually fell asleep in the chair beside him, exhausted from days of stress, and Jwin covered her with his jacket, letting her rest. This was it, he thought. This was what he'd been missing all these years. Not power. Not respect. Not the empire he'd built. Just this. A family. A reason to be better. Miho woke up 18 hours later, groggy but smiling. Did it work? He asked, voice hoarse. We'll know for sure in a few days, Dr. Chen said, checking his vitals. But so far, everything looks good. I can feel it, Miho said seriously. I can feel your cells inside me, Dad. We're the same now. Jwin laughed, the sound rusty from disuse. Yeah, kid. I guess we are. The next 72 hours were the longest of Jwin's life. Miho developed a fever on day 2, normal, Dr. Chen assured them, just his body adjusting, but Jwin couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't do anything except pace and watch and pray to gods he didn't believe in. On day 3, the fever broke. Miho's color started returning. His energy improved. The early blood tests showed that Jwin's cells were engrafting, taking hold, beginning to produce healthy blood cells. He's going to make it, Dr. Chen said on day 4, and this time there was no qualification, no hedging. The transplant took. He's going to make it. Jwin sat down hard, legs finally giving out, and let himself feel it. Relief. Joy. A hope so fierce it hurt. Zara was crying beside him, and he pulled her close, both of them shaking with emotion. Thank you, she whispered against his chest. Thank you for saving him. Thank you for bringing him to me, Jwin said. For giving me the chance to be his father. They stayed in the hospital for another 2 weeks while Miho recovered, his strength returning day by day. He complained about the bland food, about the constant tests, about being stuck in bed when he wanted to explore Seoul. All signs, Dr. Chen said with a smile, that he was healing. Jwin used that time to start dismantling his empire. He met with his lieutenants, explained that things were changing. Some of them understood. Some of them didn't. The ones who couldn't adapt found themselves working for other organizations, carefully transferred to avoid violence, but firm in the message. Kang Jiwon was done with the old ways. He kept the legitimate businesses, the restaurants, the real estate, the shipping company that actually shipped legal goods. Everything else, he let go. It cost him money. It cost him influence. But every time he thought about backing out, about returning to the familiar comfort of power and fear, he'd look at Miho and remember what mattered. Lee Min-jun came to see him on the last day of Miho's hospital stay. His second-in-command, his oldest friend, the man who'd helped him build everything. Are you sure about this? Min-jun asked, sitting in the visitor's chair where Zara usually sat. Walking away from everything we built? I'm not walking away, Jwin corrected. I'm transforming it. Making it something I won't be ashamed to explain to my son when he's older. And if your enemies see this as weakness, if they come for you, then I'll deal with it the way I always have. But I won't be the one who strikes first anymore. I won't be the one who escalates. I'm done being a monster, Min-jun. His friend was quiet for a long time, studying him. Then, you're different. Since she came back. Since you found out about the boy. You're human, Jwin suggested. Yeah, Min-jun said and smiled. Yeah, that's it. You're human again. They discharged Miho 3 days later with strict instructions about medications, follow-up appointments, and avoiding crowded places until his immune system fully recovered. Jwin arranged for a private tutor so Miho could keep up with his studies. He bought a new apartment, not the penthouse where Zara had first found him, but a real home with rooms for everyone and windows that overlooked a park instead of the city's dark heart. Zara stood in the empty living room of that new apartment, turning in slow circles, taking it all in. You didn't have to do this, she said. Yes, I did. The penthouse it was part of my old life. This is different. This is clean. He paused. This is ours, if you want it to be. She looked at him, really looked at him, and he knew she was seeing all of it, the killer, the father, the man trying to bridge the gap between who he'd been and who he wanted to become. I don't know if I can live in Seoul permanently, she said finally. My life is in New York. My job, my friends, Miho's school. So we split time, Jwin interrupted. 6 months here, 6 months there. Or whatever works. I have resources. I can make it happen. I can. He stopped, realizing he was begging. I want to be part of his life, Zara. Part of both your lives. However that looks. Whatever that means. Even if it means giving up more of your empire, your power. Especially then, he said, and meant it. She crossed the room, stood in front of him, and for a moment he thought she might leave anyway. Might take Miho and go back to New York and the simple life she'd built without him. Instead, she kissed him. It was gentle, tentative, a question more than an answer. But Jwin kissed her back, pouring everything he couldn't say into that moment, apology and gratitude and hope and fear all mixed together. We'll try, she said when they finally broke apart. We'll split our time, see how it works. See if you can really leave that life behind. But Jwin. She held his face between her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. If you go back to it, if you choose violence over us, I'm gone. Miho is gone. We'll disappear, and you'll never find us again. Do you understand? I understand, he said. And I won't. I promise you I won't. It was a promise he hoped he could keep. 3 months later, Jwin stood in the kitchen of their Seoul apartment, making breakfast while Miho did homework at the table and Zara got ready for her online lecture. It was such a normal scene, such an ordinary moment, that Jwin had to stop and marvel at it. He was cooking eggs. He was wearing an apron. His son was complaining about math homework. He didn't know what to call Zara. Girlfriend seemed insufficient, but they hadn't discussed marriage. The mother of his child was humming in the bedroom while she searched for her notes. This was what peace felt like. Dad? Miho's voice interrupted his thoughts. Can you help me with this problem? Jwin looked at the math worksheet and had absolutely no idea how to solve it. Ask your mother, he suggested. She's better at this than I am. She says you need to learn too, Miho said, grinning. She says bonding over homework is important. She's right, Zara said, emerging from the bedroom with her laptop. You can't just outsource the hard parts of parenting, Jwin. So they sat together, the three of them, working through long division and word problems, and Jwin thought about how far he'd come from that night 3 months ago when Zara had appeared in his shower. How far they'd all come. Miho's latest tests showed no signs of cancer. His body had fully accepted the transplanted cells, his immune system was rebuilding, and Dr. Chin had used the word remission for the first time. They'd need to monitor him for years. Childhood leukemia could relapse, but the prognosis was good. Better than good. Miraculous. Jwin had kept his promise about restructuring his operations. It hadn't been easy. He'd made enemies of former allies who thought he was going soft. He'd lost income streams that had sustained his empire for years. But he'd also started sleeping through the night without nightmares. Started leaving his gun in the safe instead of always within reach. Started believing that maybe, just maybe, he could have this. I'm going to work, Zara said, kissing Miho's forehead and then, more briefly, Jwin's cheek. Don't let him skip the reading assignment. He tries to every time. I'm right here, Miho protested. I know, honey. That's why I'm telling your father. She disappeared into the bedroom for her lecture, teaching Korean literature remotely to her New York students, having negotiated a hybrid position that let her split time between countries. Jwin finished the eggs, plated them, and sat down with his son. "How are you feeling?" he asked, because he asked every day, would probably ask every day for the rest of his life. "Good," Miho said through a mouthful of eggs. "Stop worrying so much. I'm your father. Worrying is my job. Mom says you're getting better at it. The worrying, I mean. Not the stopping." Jwin laughed. "She's right about that too." His phone buzzed. It always buzzed. Some things never changed, and he glanced at it. Lee Min-jun, with an update about one of their shipping contracts. Nothing urgent. Nothing that required immediate violence. Just business. Normal, legal, boring business. It was wonderful. "Dad?" Miho's voice turned serious, the way it did when he was about to ask something important. "Do you miss it? Your old life?" Jwin considered lying, decided against it. He'd promised himself honesty with this child, no matter how uncomfortable. Sometimes, he admitted. Parts of it. The certainty. The power. Knowing that when I spoke, people listened. But I have something better now. I have you. I have your mother. I have mornings like this, where the biggest crisis is long division. He met his son's eyes. The old life was exciting, but it was empty. This is full. Does that make sense?" Miho nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think so." He paused. "Will you tell me about it someday? Your old life? The real parts, not just the parts that make you look good. When you're older," Jwin promised. "When you're old enough to understand that people aren't just good or bad. That we're all complicated, making the best choices we can with what we know." He reached across the table, ruffled his son's hair. "But yeah, someday I'll tell you everything." The months rolled into a year. They split their time between Seoul and New York, Miho thriving in both cities, learning to code switch between languages and cultures with the ease of a child who belonged to two worlds. Jwin invested in legitimate businesses, using his understanding of Seoul's underworld to predict market trends without participating in the darkness. He'd never be completely clean. You didn't just erase 20 years of violence, but he was trying. Every day, he was trying. Park Sung-go went to prison for 15 years. Jwin received death threats from Park's allies, hired more security, taught Miho and Zara how to recognize danger signs. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't safe. But it was better than it had been. And slowly, impossibly, Jwin felt himself changing. The man who'd shot Park in both knees without hesitation was still there, would always be there, a weapon kept in reserve, but he wasn't in control anymore. Instead, there was the man who made breakfast. The man who helped with homework. The man who read bedtime stories in accented English and taught his son Korean curse words when Zara wasn't listening. The man who was, despite everything, a father. On Miho's 8th birthday, they threw a party in their Seoul apartment. Not a big party. Miho's immune system was still recovering, so they kept it small. Just family. Just the three of them and Lee Min-jun and Dr. Han and Dr. Chin, who'd flown in from New York specifically for this. "Make a wish," Zara said as Miho leaned over his cake, the candles flickering in the dim light. Miho closed his eyes, thought hard, then blew out all 8 candles in one breath. Everyone cheered. Jwin found himself blinking back tears, which was ridiculous. He'd never cried before Miho. Now it happened embarrassingly often. "What did you wish for?" Jwin asked. "Can't tell you," Miho said seriously. "Won't come true if I tell." But later, when everyone had left and Miho was supposed to be asleep, Jwin went to check on him and found his son still awake, staring at the ceiling. "Can't sleep?" Jwin asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Just thinking," Miho said. "About?" "My wish. I wished that we could stay like this forever. The 3 of us. Happy." He looked at Jwin with those 2 wise eyes. "Is that possible? Can we really stay happy?" Jwin thought about lying, about giving his son false promises and easy answers. But they'd built their relationship on truth, and he wouldn't break that now. I don't know, he said honestly. Life is complicated. Sometimes bad things happen even when we don't deserve them. But I can promise you this. I will fight every day to keep us happy. To keep us safe. To be the father you deserve. You already are, Miho said, and the simple certainty in his voice broke something in Jwin and healed it at the same time. Go to sleep, kid, Jwin said, voice rough with emotion. Big day tomorrow. What's tomorrow? Whatever we want it to be. That's the best part. He left Miho's room and found Zara waiting in the hallway, smiling in that way that meant she'd heard everything. You're getting good at this, she said. The dad thing. I have a good teacher, he said, pulling her close. 2 good teachers. So. She paused, and he could feel the question coming, the one they'd been dancing around for months. I was thinking. About us. About making this official. Official how? He knew what she meant, but wanted to hear her say it. Marriage, Jwin. I'm talking about marriage. About making you not just Miho's father, but my husband. About being a real family instead of this weird hybrid thing we've been doing. His heart stuttered. You want to marry me? Even knowing what I was? What I did. I want to marry who you are now, she corrected. The man who makes breakfast and helps with homework and cries at birthday parties. The man who gave up an empire to be a father. That's the man I want to marry. Yes, Jwin said immediately, because there was no other answer. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to all of it. They got married 3 months later in a small ceremony in Seoul, with Miho as the ring bearer and Lee Min-jun as best man. It wasn't the kind of wedding someone like Jwin would have had in his old life. No grand displays of wealth, no political alliances being forged, no underworld bosses in attendance. Just family and friends and people who'd helped them survive the past year. Dr. Chen gave a toast about second chances and medical miracles. Miho gave a toast about how his parents were embarrassing, but he loved them anyway. And Jwin gave a toast about how he'd spent 20 years building the wrong kind of legacy, and now he finally had the chance to build the right one. To family, he said, raising his glass. To second chances. To the woman who broke into my shower and changed everything. Everyone laughed, but Zara smiled at him across the room with such love, such absolute acceptance of everything he'd been and everything he was becoming, that Jwin felt something settle in his chest. Something that had been restless and violent for 20 years. Peace. He'd found peace. 5 years after that night when Zara appeared in his shower, Jwin stood at Miho's elementary school graduation, watching his son receive an award for academic excellence. Miho was 12 now, healthy and strong, with no signs of cancer for 5 years running. He'd grown into a serious, thoughtful child who still wanted to be a doctor, who still code-switched between Korean and English with ease, who still looked at his father with Jwin's own eyes and saw someone worth loving. I'm proud of you, Jwin said later when they were walking home through Seoul's evening streets, Zara between them holding both their hands. For graduating elementary school? Miho asked, amused. That's not exactly hard, Dad. For surviving, Jwin said quietly. For fighting when you had every reason to give up. For being kind even though life hasn't always been kind to you. For... He stopped, trying to find words. For teaching me how to be human again. Miho was quiet for a moment. Then, you taught me too, you know. How to be strong. How to fight for what matters. How to choose to be better than your circumstances. He squeezed Jwin's hand. We saved each other, Dad. That's what family does. Jwin looked at his son, his brilliant, stubborn, miracle of a son, and thought about how close he'd come to never knowing him. How close he'd come to staying in that life of violence and emptiness, never understanding what he was missing. Yeah, he said, voice thick. That's exactly what family does. They walked home together through the Seoul twilight, past the neon lights and the crowds, past the places where Jwin had once built his empire on blood and fear. But that was someone else's story now. That was the ghost of Kang Jiwon, the man who died the moment his son's mother appeared in his shower and demanded to be seen. This was a different story. A better story. A story about redemption and second chances and the ways love can transform even the most broken people into something whole. And as Jwin opened the door to their apartment, their home, and watched Miho and Zara head inside, laughing about something he'd missed, he realized that this was what victory looked like. Not territory conquered or enemies defeated or power accumulated. Just this. Just love. Just family. Just everything that mattered. He followed them inside, closed the door on his past, and stepped into the future he'd never thought he deserved, but that had found him anyway. And for the first time in 20 years, Kang Jiwon was exactly where he was supposed to be. So there it is, the story of a man who found his son and lost his empire and discovered that he'd made a fair trade. But I need to know something from you. Would you have made the same choices Jwin did? Would you have walked away from everything you'd built for a child you'd never known existed? And what do you think happened to Park Sung-go in prison? Did his story end there, or is there more to tell? If this story moved you, if it made you feel something, then I need you to do something for me. Don't just scroll past. Don't just walk away. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to change, that redemption is possible even for people who think they're past saving. Hit that subscribe button, not for me, but for the next person who needs to know that love can transform even the darkest souls. These stories matter. Your engagement makes them possible. And somewhere out there, someone is reading this who needed to hear that they can be more than their worst choices. Be that person for them. Share this story. Subscribe. Comment. Let's keep breathing life into tales that were never meant to stay silent. Because in the end, that's all any of us want, to be seen, to be understood, and to know that it's never too late to come home.